Idaho has excellent universities, and I think that the legislature and the taxpayers of Idaho have committed large amounts of resources to promote that excellence in our universities. We have high expectations for our universities. Last year and the prior year, we started pointing out some potential problems arising in universities having to do with critical race theory, critical social justice programming, and diversity, equity, and inclusion training and programs, which are part of that critical race theory and critical social justice programming. In fact, last year we passed a bill, 377, House 377, and which gave clear intent that our education programs, including universities, was going to treat all students equally and eliminate critical race theory programming and activism on our campuses. We, in fact, last year reduced the increase in college budgets by $2.5 million so that they would not need to be spending that money on critical social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Since last year, unfortunately, the universities have not done such reductions and saved the taxpayers that money. They have, in fact, increased their activities on campuses. Boise State University started the Anti-Racism Center, and if you look at its programming, it is largely critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The University of Idaho started the Black Cultural Center to provide, quote, safe space for Black students with a new dedicated director, paid a salary. Again, promoting the ideals of critical race theory, social justice programming. Both Boise State University and the University of Idaho have responded to the $2.5 million budget reduction of 2021 by not eliminating existing DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion bureaucracies, but by requiring job candidates to fill out disclosure statements about their diversity, equity, and inclusion philosophies. To be clear, these line items which are eliminating funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion at our universities is tied directly to activities that we can identify. Let me just explain a few. At Boise State University, the Student Equity Center is dedicated to raising awareness about, quote, oppression and systemic racism and their relationship to group identity. These are bedrock concepts of critical social justice. The center offers faculty and students various diversity and inclusion trainings, and that include materials such as a racial inventory quiz that aims to measure participants' level of privilege based on their race or color. That's in direct contradiction to 377. In this Student Equity Center, there's a salary tied to a vice president for equity initiatives. There's also an administrative assistant. We can identify the salary for the assistant to the vice president, but not the administrative assistant. At Boise State, continuing, Boise State's Blue Sky Institute, part of their mission is to, quote, advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, and promotes programming on topics such as systemic racism and unpacking equity. You'll find that these are major tenets of critical race theory. In the Blue Sky Institute, we can identify a program manager with a salary of $49,011, a DEI fellow, a volunteer student basic needs coordinator, a graduate assistant. Continuing at Boise State University, there's a Gender Equity Center, which provides, quote, an environment for people of all gender identities to explore, celebrate, and educate the campus community about gender equity. The center's webpage features critical race theorist Kimberly Crenshaw, known for her work on intersectionality.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Nash.
we're getting a little outside the lines.
I
of the
think we
budget.
are, absolutely. Let's wrap this up, Representative Nate. I don't think we need to mention names and that. If you want to talk about a program at one of the universities, that's fine. Let's leave the personal information out, please. Otherwise, we'll go out of order and keep moving forward.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's no more names, so.
Please.
Thank you.
And let's make this quick, if you could, please.
Is there a time limit?
There may be. Please,
Okay.
continue.
The website again, at the Gender Equity Center. The website explains that becoming an LGBTQIA+ advocate requires ongoing reflection of one's privilege and recommends resources on white privilege for students. In that center, you have a director at $65,000, a project director for violence prevention and response initiative at $45,000, an administrative assistant at nearly $38,000. At Boise State University, the Center for Teaching and Learning seeks to create, quote, diverse, inclusive, and equitable learning environments. While they sound nice, those are nice sounding terms. Those are the buzzwords of critical race theory and critical social justice programming. And in action, they violate House
Mr.
Bill
Chairman, I
377.
object. We are talking critical race theory instead of budgets here. This
We
is
certainly are.
not the
Appreciate
place.
that, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, these reductions in the budget are to
I think we
have the
I think
universities
we heard
comply
the
with
reductions.
Idaho
I
law.
understand where we're at. Let's move on, please.
I will focus more on the numbers, but there
Yeah, let's
does
stick with
need
the
to be
numbers.
a context here.
Well, I think that you've identified that in 377 in the Germain Committee bill, and that's
There are-
all you need to address and move on with your budget numbers, please.
There are 5 salaries within that Center for Teaching and Learning that are tied to the diversity, equity, and inclusion cuts that I've identified in the budget.
Very good.
The University of Idaho Office of Equity and Diversity also has similar programming, and we've identified 3 different salaries tied to that.
Okay.
The office hosts many left-wing events, such as Black Lives Matter speakers, and focusing on critical analysis or critical theory of systems of oppression. The University of Idaho also has an LGBTQA office dedicated to exposing students to the exploration of sexual orientation, gender identity, and eliminating homophobia, heterosexism, and gender identity oppression. I've identified the salary of the director there at $50,900. The Office of Multicultural Affairs, dedicated to advancing diversity and inclusion and promoting Black Lives Matter. 2 salaries there, plus another one that can't identify the amount. The Women's Center, also Gender Equity and Social Justice, identified 2 salaries there. Idaho State University also has an Office of Equity and Inclusion with similar programming goals. They evaluate the campus climate, promote campus-wide participation in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and we've identified 4 salaries there and 1 that's unknown. These universities are all
Chairman.
now requiring diversity,
Objection.
equity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Senator
Nye.
Nye. Please.
This is under Rule 20G. I do object to the testimony. There have been audits, by the way, that have found no such problem. But anyway, just a formal objection to this testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nye. Appreciate that. Let's get a little closer to wrap it up. I think you're on your 3rd university. Is that correct, Representative Nate?
Yeah, and there were only 3 universities, so
Okay.
that's good.
Please.
The audits, by the way, while they claim they found no evidence of it, I have just given you pages of evidence on this.
Thank you.
So it is there. There are common excuses made by the universities for diversity, equity, and inclusion, talking about workforce training, student health.
Mr. Chairman.
afraid of
Let's
consequences,
stick to the
budget.
accreditation.
Thank you, Representative Green. You've mentioned the comments, you've talked about the numbers. I think that's pretty clear, Representative Nate.
All right, so
Let's not get into any personal comments. Let's keep it to the budget, please.
I don't think I've made any personal comments.
Okay, appreciate that.
Any accusations toward individuals, but I am talking about the institutions.
Yes.
And them being wide stewards of Idaho education dollars.
Thank you.
And these are taxpayer dollars dedicated to excellence in higher education. To the extent that universities are promoting critical social justice, critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, they are taking their eye off the ball. Like I said at the beginning, we have excellent universities with excellent faculty and administration. We should focus on the excellence of higher education rather than indoctrination. And I will just point out, I've given you tangible, actual evidences of us taking our eye off the ball. This is not chasing ghosts.
Mr. Chairman, I
This
move
is
to call the
identifying
question.
real problems. I don't think you can call for the question in the middle of my testimony. I've been recognized by the chair.
We actually can, but let's wrap it up.
Okay.
Please, Representative, and move
I
on.
submit this budget as a budget which backs up our desires from 377 and our intent last year with our budget, that this one will further send the message that higher education should focus on excellence in education and not indoctrination.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate your comments.